Szanowni Państwo, wracamy po przerwie kawowej. Kontynuujemy wystąpienia plenarne. Będziemy zaczynali od wystąpienia pani profesor Atee Hakkelsby. Jej wystąpienie będzie dotyczyło systemu dozoru elektronicznego i technologii w wymiarze sprawiedliwości. Pani profesor jest wykładowcą wymiaru sprawiedliwości w sprawach karnych na Uniwersytecie w Birmingham. Podejmowała różne badania i publikowała na temat wielu aspektów procesu karnego. Najnowsze projekty naukowe dotyczą systemu dozoru elektronicznego, który jest finansowany przez Komisję Europejską. Naukowe zainteresowania pani profesor również dotyczą technologii śledztwa w różnych domenach. Profesor jest ekspertem i doradcą akademickim w Dyrekcji Monitoringu Elektronicznego Służby Więziennej i Probacji Królewskiej Mości w Wielkiej Brytanii oraz Dyrekcji do Spraw Sankcji, Zwolnień i Skazań w Ministerstwie Sprawiedliwości w Wielkiej Brytanii. Pani profesor Atee Hakkelsby jest stypendystką Akademii Nauk Społecznych. Serdecznie zapraszamy panią Atee do wystąpienia.
Thank you for inviting me to this conference. Thank you very much. It was very nice to meet you in the UK earlier this year. And I'm enjoying my time in Warsaw, having been here since Thursday at another conference and teaching at the University of Warsaw. So I am going to speak about electronic monitoring more broadly, but also looking at alcohol monitoring. It will be a different perspective to what you've already heard. And my approach is to think about how we can use it ethically and responsively, meaning that not everybody is the same. We're all different, particularly different cohorts of offenders. So women, young people, people of different cultural and ethnic backgrounds. So I was interested with the use of, and I have no data on this, so I don't actually know, but the use of alcohol monitoring in New Zealand, Australia and Canada, where there is a large alcohol problem with indigenous populations. My suspicion is that alcohol monitoring is being used a lot with those groups, which raises serious ethical issues. So, by way of introduction, electronic monitoring, of which I've spent 30 years doing research on it, is an umbrella term for a very wide range of technologies. They're used to monitor the whereabouts or the behavior of individuals remotely. So that's the key thing. But even though they are remote, they still involve people looking over other people. So by supervision, it's not all by the technology can only do so much. We as people have to interpret what the technology is telling us. Electronic monitoring technologies, as we've already heard, are used around the world in different settings. The context is very important. We are all from different cultures and histories, and that's a really important part of how we use electronic monitoring well. Its use is expanding. Every time I come to one of these conferences, I hear about new ways in which it's being used. We've already heard from that there are all sorts of reasons why electronic monitoring is used, but they're all quite similar. Reducing prison populations is a big one. Very high reconviction rates for people coming out of prison. The harm caused by prison, which is, taking them out and isolating them from society. The cost of imprisonment. Improved monitoring of compliance. We haven't heard that much about that at the moment today, but it can potentially mean that we are more likely to pick up breaches, which has a good thing if you want to pick up breaches, but also can be a disadvantage because you're picking up so many breaches that you don't know what to do about them. There is some evidence of lower offending rates on electronic monitoring, but mostly only during the time that you're wearing the equipment. There is much less known about what happens afterwards. So it may be that people comply while they've got the tag on, and then as soon as it's taken off, they go back to their old habits. And increasingly, and we've heard some of this already this morning, the specific types of offending that these technologies are being used for, particularly domestic violence or abuse. So, and we've heard some of this morning, electronic monitoring is viewed as a quick fix. Everything is very technologically led. Producers of the technology are looking at various ways of it being used. And it's seen as an answer to a myriad of criminal justice problems, here specifically today about alcohol-related violence. It's true that EM is better than prison, but not everybody who gets electronic monitoring will have been sent to prison. And the motivations and consequences for using electronic monitoring really need to be thought about and reviewed before you use it, before going headlong into using it. And I'll come on to that in a little while, because it's not always positive and it's not always benign. There are negative reasons. So as a kind of weighty point. So I'm going to talk about some of those. So in terms of ethical frameworks, there are a set of norms and values which we need to think about and consider when thinking about how to use a type of technology. It's important that we do the right thing at the right time with the right people. And we do have a framework. Okay, we have the International Convention, we have the European Convention on Human Rights. We have professional standards and ethics in prison services, in police services. We have the legal framework and what the law says we can do. And yes, we might be able to change the law, but we need to be careful about how we do that because of unintended consequences. And then we have the kind of cultural framework, which is where the context comes in. All these frameworks require thought and interpretation because they are not very specific. They're often quite vague. They're often a compromise, particularly those international standards. Okay, they're a compromise between lots of different countries. There are very conflicting views about what is and isn't ethical, and they're often difficult to operationalize. And importantly, there are always exceptions. So in the West, in particular, electronic monitoring has been used for terrorist-related offenders when there's been very little evidence that they've been involved in terror, at least very little publicized evidence. So that's one example where it's being used as in exceptional circumstances, and I'm sure that there are others that I'm unaware of. So, what are the kind of challenges to those ethical frameworks? And I was listening to a very interesting news item yesterday around new technologies and systems. AI in particular is going on very, very quickly, and the data availability and analytics capabilities, we haven't even started to think about that and how these data that we're collecting with these devices might be used in the future and whether that is good or bad use. There's also globalization. So this whole panel is from the UK. So there's a lot of policy transfer, what I would call policy transfer, that goes on in electronic monitoring, partly because of the commercial companies, but partly because of organisations like the Confederation of European Probation, where there's a lot of learning. I understand there's some Armenian colleagues in Poland at the moment looking at the electronic monitoring system because they're going to implement it in Armenia. And that has gone on. So what that has meant is that a lot of the electronic monitorings look very similar in different countries. But it's really necessary to keep what we do and how we do it under review, using some agreed ethical principles. And the starting point is the Council of Europe's electronic monitoring recommendation, which is available online. You'll all be able to have a look at that. But importantly, those ethical frameworks, so that was done in 2014. There wasn't much alcohol monitoring going on then. Things have gone on leaps and bounds since 2014. And those ethical frameworks and the legal regulation tend to lag behind technological developments, which is quite unhelpful. It doesn't just go for this area, it goes for all kinds of technology. Yeah, we need to be a lot smarter and really question about how we can do law better and quicker to catch up with developments. So this is a bit of theory, but it's quite a simple idea. This is what's called the Collingridge dilemma. And it's used in engineering and design a lot. And it's centered on the fact that we can't predict the future. We don't know what technology is able to do. So we invent something. We don't know much about it. We start to use it. And only once we've started to use it and it's been implemented, do we actually realise the intended and unintended consequences of it. But once we know what the intended and unintended consequences of it are, it's too late to change because it's too expensive. We can't get the companies to change it. So, I mean, I was interested that Scram said they hadn't done too much innovation with their tags since 2014. That's a long time. Okay, it's kind of stuck and it doesn't move on, when in fact there's all sorts of things that many of us would like that tag to do differently, some of which I'll come on to in a bit. So it is really important because of this, and this is a well-known rule, if you like, in natural sciences, we need to be really careful and try and think through, before we implement a technology, what some of the problems might be. But we will never be able to understand everything that is going to happen with that technology. Okay? But we have to try and think that through, and the more minds from all different areas, the better we will be at it. Okay, so first and foremost, with any kind of electronic monitoring, whether it be alcohol or other kinds of electronic monitoring, we need to decide what we want to use it for, right? Rather than just going, oh, this is a wonderful technology, we need to work out what are we going to use it for, in what circumstances, with whom. We also need to think, and we're here in criminal justice fields, so there is an element of punishment in this, which we can't get away from. But we need to be careful that we don't harm people. We need to provide enough pain for whatever the purpose is. Not too much, because if we give too much pain, that will lead to unintended consequences. But we need to avoid harm, avoiding all that collateral damage that can happen with these kind of technologies. So, for example, impacts on partners, husbands, wives, children, on parts of their life, what we would call pro-social parts of their life, on employment. So, you know, can they go to work with a tag on? Will somebody, if they're working in a bar, want to be served by somebody with a tag on when they don't really know what that tag is about? So we need to think about those unintended consequences. We need to think about the principles of punishment and decide which ones we want to use it for. We also need to think about safety and security. Are we using it for public safety, victim safety? We've already talked about domestic violence this morning, or some kind of protection. It will never protect 100%, which is really important about don't raising expectations too much. And is successful completion of an order, compliance, sufficient, or are we looking for something else? But it's very clear for EM to be ethical, it must have a clear purpose. We must know what we are looking to do with it. So if we think about the purpose of alcohol monitoring, and Robin, who is going to follow me, will be able to say a lot more about this than me. But the general gist of why we have alcohol monitoring in England and Wales is that alcohol is related to a high proportion of offences. Apparently, alcohol is involved in nearly half of all violent crime, higher cases for domestic violence. The London pilot was originally proposed to tackle violence in the nighttime economy, i.e. people drinking too much when they're out and having a fight in the street. The Humberside, Lincolnshire and North Yorkshire pilot was focused on domestic violence. But for both of these pilots, what I would call mission creep has been a problem. In other words, they're doing something different to what they intended. So in terms of offences, the Mopac pilot, the London pilot, was not just about street violence. In fact, a high proportion of those who got an alcohol tag, it was for drink driving. Now, you might think you want to use it for drink driving, that's fine, but it wasn't the original purpose. And it was very low-level offending, including, as a criminologist, you know, very, very, very low-level offending, like resisting arrest, using threatening words and behaviour, which are very, very, very low-level. And in the Humberside pilot, only less than a third of those who got the tag were actually domestic violence offenders, and that was the purpose, okay? So it was lower than expected. So all sorts of other offences, particularly drink driving. So it seems to me that these tags and drink driving are somehow inextricably linked. So the target group has been low or middle risk of reoffending and serious harm. But if we look at some of the reports, only 50% of those who got the tag said that they'd argued with friends or family weekly or at least every couple of months. I'd be able to tick that box, okay? Nothing to do with alcohol, just having petty arguments in my household. 20% reported arguing or fighting with strangers, okay? So on the one hand, that's quite high, but if that's the target group, that's actually very low. And 7% reported drink driving, okay? So actually, are we targeting the right people? The answer to that is not all the time. So what are some of the ethical challenges here? Many are shared with electronic monitoring more generally. We have to say the involvement and reliance on the private sector. Okay, they provide the technology. In some places, they also provide the field services. And with alcohol monitoring, this ethical issue is higher because at the moment we have a dominant one provider. I understand there's more tags on the way, but at the moment we only have one provider. This is nearly a quote from a judge. Everybody has a right to drink. Is it not a human right to do so? It's not like drugs, which are illegal. Drinking alcohol is not illegal in most countries. Okay? We need to be clear about that link between violence and alcohol, which is not quite as simple as it might be made out to be. Drinking is also an addiction, so we need to provide support for wearers, not just stick technology on their legs. Does alcohol monitoring increase harm? It's medically dangerous just to stop drinking. If you are dependent, and Robin will say more about this, if you are dependent on alcohol and have been drinking large amounts of alcohol, it's not medically okay to just stop. The current equipment doesn't allow for certain activities because it can't be submerged in water. So you can't swim. A pro-social activity, something that we actually should be promoting, and you can't have a bath. Okay, so that's fine if you've got a shower, but if you haven't got a shower, that's a bit of a problem. Some people can't wear the devices currently on the market. They have nickel plates. I'm allergic to nickel, so I cannot wear this equipment. 10 to 15% of the population are allergic to nickel. So immediately you wouldn't be able to use it with that group. And they have to know that they are allergic to nickel. Now, most women do, okay, because of jewellery, etc., but probably a lot of men don't. Will the wearers be up-tariffed? Because alcohol monitoring, those tags do alcohol monitoring and curfew monitoring at the same time. It's very easy to say, well, we may as well switch both of those on, okay, rather than having just one. And if it's available, if both are available, then, you know, mission creep is we will do both of them. There is an ethical question about whether alcohol monitoring should be available as a standalone measure or whether it should be integrated into wraparound services. How we assess people, that it's suitable for people, and is assessment always necessary? And real questions about what is necessary. Why is a wearable device necessary? Is it necessary for everybody just because it exists? Could a breathalyzer, a remote breathalyzer that you basically carry around with you, and you can have random remote tests done using facial recognition and fingerprints, is that not enough for a lot of these people? You don't necessarily need the tag in the same way. I'm going to run out of time, but just around responsiveness, this is about making sure that we treat everybody in the way that brings around equity. So this picture just shows you the difference. If we give everybody the same thing, you get what's on the left, okay, because we are not all the same. Some people in this picture are taller than others. But in reality, we need to be responsive to people, not give everybody the same thing, so that everybody ends up in the same place. So I'm not going to go through that. That's the Council of Europe Basic Equality Principles about treating everybody the same. The ethical challenge, and this is a big one. Electronic monitoring equipment is designed for men, by adult men, for Western markets, which in Poland may not be too much of a problem. EM regimes were first designed and implemented in Western democracies, dominated by men as defendants, offenders, law enforcement and decision makers. The policy of policy transfer has perpetuated that original approach, and it doesn't consider the different circumstances and needs of all wearers. So if we think about the equipment, the size, okay, if we put that equipment on, I'm going to pick you because you're big, yeah. I'm small, I've got small ankles, you're much bigger than me. That tag would look very different on you than it would on me, okay? It's also black, okay, so it looks different on different skin types. Basically, we use the same tags for everybody, but we are very different. Our size, our skin colour, our leg shapes, our physiology is all different. And it's inadequate, particularly for women and children. That tag on a teenage leg would be very, very big and very heavy. So I'm going to skip that because I haven't got time. I can talk about it at another time. Okay, I think that's it. So I thought I had another slide. I do. Is there not another? Okay. So by way of conclusion, we have to be clear and transparent about why we are using an electronic monitoring technology. Why do we want to use it? What is its purpose? We need to be very aware of the intrusiveness of the technology and the system around it and the impact on the everyday lives of the wearers and those that live with them and work with them. We need to consider the diversity of wearers. We are all different backgrounds, circumstances and needs. We need to make sure that electronic monitoring is responsive to those diversity of wearers and their circumstances, instead of this kind of current one-size-fits-all approach that we have basically across the world. We need to consider those ethical issues and the potential for mission creep and that Collingridge dilemma before we implement a new technology, not afterwards. Okay, so real thought needs to be put into, if you're going to do alcohol monitoring in Poland, what are you going to use it for, how are you going to use it, and what do you want to get out of it? Those are the real questions that you need to think before you start. Thank you very much.
Ja jeszcze może ad vocem tutaj bardzo interesującego wykładu. Pani profesor, bardzo dziękujemy. Natomiast tak mi się skojarzyło, może troszeczkę humorystycznie, że pani profesor bardzo piękny tutaj wkład daje nam do mody, która może zostać opracowana. I tutaj do przedstawicieli firmy Scrum prośba, róbcie panowie, zróbcie kolorowe, w różnej wielkości, w różnym designie, piękne bransolety i myślę, że to będzie taka unifikacja, która będzie zapobiegała stygmatyzacji. Dziękuję.
Dziękujemy bardzo pani profesor Natea Hackelsby za wykład, w którym poruszyła szczególnie ważne aspekty etyczne technologii TMSA. Teraz będziemy łączyć się z panią Robin Malan de Merindol z Ministerstwa Sprawiedliwości Wielkiej Brytanii. Pani Robin opowie nam o systemie monitorowania alkoholowego w Anglii i w Walii. Jest liderem do spraw polityki systemu dozoru elektronicznego w Ministerstwie Sprawiedliwości. Od wielu lat pełnili tam różne funkcje, również w więziennictwie, wcześniej wspierając wyższych urzędników służby cywilnej. Dzięki temu ma pełne zrozumienie istoty i roli systemu dozoru elektronicznego w systemie karnym. Od 2017 roku nie tylko zajmuje się SDE, ale i wspieraniem programów transdermalnego monitorowania systemu alkoholu, gdzie wraz z kolejnymi badaniami pilotażowymi prowadzonymi w Wielkiej Brytanii coraz bardziej dostrzega i podkreśla rolę kuratorskiej służby sądowej w systemie technologii alkoholowego monitorowania. Zapraszam panią Robin do zabrania głosu.
Hello everybody. I don't know if you see and hear me. I was going to try and share my presentation with you, but it just crashed my screen. I also can't know my background. So you're getting to see the inside of my sitting room. So I apologise for that. Is it possible for anybody to bring up the presentation?
It is. So we are going to start.
Yes, happy to do that. I'll begin by saying thank you so much for inviting me to this conference, being able to speak to you and tell you about how we introduced alcohol monitoring into England and Wales, and how we look at it and how we actually do it. I have been able to listen to some of the presentations before, so I'm going to try and reflect on some of that as I go and I speak. It might not entirely coincide with the actual presentation.
I'm sorry, Robin. You have to try it without a presentation because it will be impossible to see you. Yes, it is an option, you or a presentation. So please start without. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for letting me know. I mean, there are hard copies, so people can reflect on that afterwards. In light of some of the conversations you've been having, particularly in response to what I was saying, I think I'd like to say that in this country, as Anthony alluded to, victims report that alcohol is associated with around 40% of violent offending. So one way or another, the perception is that alcohol is a factor in violence. When we use alcohol monitoring, it is only on adults. For us, that means 18 years and older. And there has to be a problem with alcohol. So that will either be the offence, associated offence that brings the person to court, or it will be about risk escalation because of alcohol being a factor in risk. And we might be interested in using alcohol monitoring as a protective factor, for example, in safeguarding for contact with children or vulnerable adults. And we are absolutely driven by accountability across our criminal justice system. And we are interested and are still working through what the potential rehabilitative aspects are of alcohol monitoring. So there are 2 points in the line of committing offence to when you come out the end, where we use alcohol monitoring. And firstly, I'm going to talk about community sentences. That's where the whole of the sentence is served in a community. So adults only, and we have 2 types of community sentence. One is community order, and one is suspended sentence order. If you breach a community order, you'll be brought back to the court for further sentencing, potentially alternative sentencing. If it's a suspended sentence, you might then have your sentence of imprisonment brought forward and you go to custody. So the offence or associated offence has to be alcohol related. And really important to Anthony's point, the person may not be alcohol dependent. If you, the sentence imposes a ban on drinking alcohol for up to 120 days, immediately, once it's issued by the court, it comes into effect. So any alcohol after that point is against the order of the court. And we know that withdrawal, immediate withdrawal from alcohol by somebody who's addicted can cause death. Bottom line, it can kill you. And we know this well because of imprisonment. When it comes into a prison, alcohol dependent, they're immediately go into our healthcare and our detox and medical supervision. So we know how serious it is. we use the, so I'll come on to how we test that later. So it's any offence type. It is primarily a punishment for community sentence. That is the headline. I think I've covered, you could, ultimately breach could land you in prison. So the other piece we use for monitoring is following a period in custody. When someone is sentenced to a period in prison, they usually, most sentences, they serve half of it in prison and half of it on licence in the community. And it's the licence in the community aspect where we would use alcohol monitoring. There has to be a criminal need. Anthony alluded to, alcohol isn't illegal. It's freely available when you're not in prison. So, ideally, this is about banning alcohol in the country. It's about substance use, reducing harms. So we would be looking for a history of alcohol dependency leading to criminal behaviour, it would follow in those circumstances. If somebody had been addicted to alcohol, been detoxed in custody, we would be interested in maintaining a safe level of alcohol use. And really importantly, this would be an additional licence, and it isn't a punishment. It is to support rehabilitation, reducing reoffending, and reducing harms. The use must be necessary and proportionate. Tagging is a really, really big deal, and as we've heard, these days it's pretty big, pretty impactful on your life, but got to be proportionate and necessary. Again, any offence type. And non-compliance could result in return to custody. My next invisible slide was going to set out the timeline when, as Amit spoke about, in London, it was the first idea to introduce these alcohol tags or an alcohol program from America. But as we have, and Amit's covered quite a lot, I'll just do, I think, what's perhaps most important from our point of view about the introduction and the journey from when the idea first started to where we are now. First attempt to get legislation into statute for banning alcohol as part of a community sentence was not successful. So didn't make it through the processes of legislation, and it wasn't until a few years later in 2012 that an alcohol ban as a requirement for community sentence was introduced in the Legal Aid Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Act in 2012. And it wasn't given. There was quite a lot of discussion in Parliament about the point we made earlier. It's not illegal to drink. What do you mean? You can't have a drink. That's crazy. And there were also real concerns about there being enough support for people who had alcohol needs. So it was challenging to bring it through Parliament, but it was brought through. And what it required was a pilot. So we test legislation before we could bring it into force across England and Wales. It only applies in England and Wales. So the testing was pilots, and I mentioned the Western London one and the shorter in the northeast of England. I think I'd like to say in fairness that the London pilot didn't seek to place any restriction on who should get the AAMR. it was really a case of seeing how sentences use. We can't tell sentences what they should use different requirements for, only exceptions. So it's they did it. That's what the Motorway Parliament did. There was quite a lot of drink driving. In this country, in England and Wales, we have a really strong response to drink driving offences, in that we can fine somebody an awful lot of money, and we can ban them driving for quite a long time. So we wouldn't see this as a first response to drink driving offences. We would like to see it as if it's used in that area after moderate occasions. And we've got some insights that I'll go into later. They're unpublished, so just to give you a sense of where this is going. So we had two pilots, and then there was no money and no will from the government to do anything about introducing alcohol monitoring. It didn't seem a priority immediately after the pilot. So we quietly ran a small concept to test with our common licence and to the night. And it was really our part to say, well, behind the scenes, what have we learned from the AAMR pilots? What's really important to us? And how can we use this as a rehabilitative tool? Put it totally in the hands of probation to use at their discretion with as much flexibility as possible. And really, that little proof of concept gave us a lot of ideas. Change of government and change of businesses and real impetus to introduce the alcohol monitoring. And that was by the same team that introduced it in London. So I mean, it was the we expected it was going to go up the priority list, and it certainly did. So we introduced the community centre first in Wales, to sort of find our feet, and across the rest of England in March 2021. And then, because of this interest, we introduced alcohol monitoring licence first in Wales and 3 of the women's prisons. And then in June this year, we've gone national alcohol monitoring in Wales. So we've completed our programme as it stands, and our intention. We haven't completed it, and it's in our business as usual. I think it would be useful for you to hear that what we've ended up with not actually necessarily quite what the parliamentarians at the time hoped we would have, which was very much the American Dakota, I think it's Dakota, someone will correct me if I'm wrong, model of banning alcohol with an immediate response if somebody breached it, into the sheriff's office overnight, sober up type thing. And we would say we've ended up with a much more, particularly because these people are managed by probation and the licence tool. Yes, so I think, yes, I'll move on to my next invisible slide. The next thing I'd like to talk about is context. I think Anthea spoke very strongly about context. And we have taken into account the wider context of operation delivery of electronic monitoring in England and Wales. And over time, the impetus for how to deal with substance abuse, which alcohol falls within, across government. We have we'd like to feel, we've been driven by flexibility and keeping as flexible service as possible. So I think if I make three rather really strong points. We consider it good practice to consider other interventions or support alcohol monitoring, so not just tag off you go. We would expect there to be other supporting interventions in place. I think the other thing is, the key for us is to reduce alcohol to a level that reduces harm. We're not trying to tell people that after you've finished your alcohol ban, you're not drinking again, or it's about drinking at safe levels within people who we supervise in the criminal justice system. And the sort of the control of the drinking is what does the job. The tag helps us. It's a tool, and for individuals, they will respond to that tool differently. Let's be honest, it's when the alcohol is either under control or not there, the risk of harm goes. Not the whole case. Domestic violence is much more complex than that, but you know that's essentially how we feel about it. On a community centre, we spoke about the need to be sure that the individual is alcohol dependent. And the tool that we look at is the alcohol use disorder identification test. And that's a World Health Organization developed set of questions that, although not extensive, in the hands of somebody who's trained, can give you a good idea of whether somebody is likely to be alcohol dependent or not, or just a heavy user. And probation are encouraged to seek professional advice if they're not sure, and to ask the court to agree to do that. So we would expect there to be...
Robin, we have to go to the conclusion, please.
Oh, gosh!
Yes, yes.
Well, that was very quick. In conclusion, I would say that we are very pleased with the way alcohol monitoring has been introduced in this country and is being used in England and Wales. We're waiting for more findings. We are continuing to evaluate, and we don't see any enormous changes down the road. We're expecting to be able to embed this, find out more how it works, most effective use, and develop policy, but not necessarily legislation. So I hope you get to have a look at the pack and the examples of some real sort of transformative outcomes that would be subject to alcohol monitoring. And it's been a pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're also really happy for your involvement. Once again, thank you, Robin. Teraz przechodzimy do wystąpienia pani dr Lori Bainbridge, która wygłosi wykład dotyczący tego, jak można wzmacniać abstynencję alkoholową w systemie Anglii i Walii, co wiemy w tym aspekcie dotychczas. Pani dr Laura Bainbridge jest wykładowcą wymiaru sprawiedliwości w sprawach karnych Szkoły Prawa Uniwersytetu w Leeds. Zainteresowania naukowe pani doktor są na styku polityki społecznej, kryminologii i nauk politycznych. Jest kierownikiem studiów podyplomowych, w tym również kierunku, gdzie właśnie analizuje się korzyści i zagrożenia związane z okresem przymusowej trzeźwości sprawców przemocy domowej. Pani doktor Laura Bainbridge jest założycielką i przewodniczącą brytyjskiej sieci obowiązkowej trzeźwości. Zasiada w kolegium redakcyjnym Journal of Social Policy. Dodatkowo jest członkiem grupy badawczej do spraw reformy penalnej w Howard League for Penal Reforms Research Advisory Group i zasiada jeszcze jako organ doradczy w West Yorkshire Violence Reduction Unit, czyli również zajmuje się sprawami dotyczącymi możliwości redukcji przestępczości. Zapraszamy panią doktor do wystąpienia.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Laura Bainbridge. I'm a lecturer in criminal justice at the School of Law at the University of Leeds in the UK. I've been conducting academic research on enforced alcohol abstinence and alcohol tagging for around 8 years now. First as part of my doctoral thesis, where I first met Amit, and then later as part of my postdoctoral fellowship at the London School of Economics. It's also set to remain part of my broader research portfolio at Leeds. I'm also the founder and chair of the UK Compulsory Sobriety Network. Now, the aims of this network are threefold, so to bring together stakeholders, to explore the political, social, legal, technical and ethical issues arising from current and future use of compulsory sobriety, to reflect on the past, present and future of compulsory sobriety legislation, and crucially, to share knowledge of and draw lessons from schemes that have been launched in Scotland, Northern Ireland and overseas. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here in Poland to learn more about the alcohol tagging developments that are taking place here and to provide you with an insight into the research evidence base that exists in England and Wales in relation to the alcohol abstinence monitoring requirement pilots, now abbreviated to AAMR, that were delivered in England and Wales between 2014 and 2019. So I was concerned that this was going to repeat the content of Robin's presentation, but given that we couldn't see hers, this is the timeline that Robin was referring to for our AAMR and alcohol monitoring on licence pilot. So you'll see we began with the LASPO Act and we end with the AML rollout across England. Now, the AAMR was rolled out in England and Wales in 2020 and 2021, but prior to that, we had 2 AAMR pilots, one in London and one in the north of England, and 5 evaluation reports have been published that present the findings of these pilots. Now, the first pilot was the London Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime pilot. It was a 12-month proof of concept pilot, and it launched in summer 2014 in 4 boroughs. Now, during this, small-scale pilot, 113 AAMRs were imposed with an average length of 75 days. And as we already know, the AAMR was given for a range of crime types, but most commonly in relation to violence or drink driving related offences. The compliance rate was 92%, and indicative analysis conducted on this pilot cohort and a well-matched comparison group explored offending behaviours over 3 different time frames. And the analysis suggested that with regards to offending behaviours on the order, in the first 12 months from the start of the order and 9 months since completion, there didn't appear to be any significant differences between the AAMR cohort and the comparison group. To put that more simply, the weight of evidence that we have suggested that the impact upon offending behaviours of the AAMR was comparable to pre-existing requirements such as unpaid work. Now, following this initial pilot, a 2-year Pan-London rollout occurred. It was launched in April 2016. During this time frame, 1,014 AAMRs were imposed, with an average length of 61 days. Now, AAMRs were typically imposed as part of a community order rather than a suspended sentence order, and the majority received multiple requirements, with just 29% receiving a standalone AAMR. The compliance rate was 94%. Now, overall, the AAMR was welcomed by stakeholders across London as a tool for addressing alcohol-related offending behaviour. It was also felt that while the AAMR was kind of branded a punitive measure and in terms of legislation is a punitive measure, it had a rehabilitative component, as it provided a few moments for offenders to reflect on their behaviour. And survey findings from offenders themselves, so I think apart from Amit's quote earlier, this is the first time we've discussed the impact on offenders themselves, they were generally optimistic. They said that it had a positive impact on their lives in relation to their health, well-being and offending behaviour. But again, practical concerns were raised about the size and design of the tag and the stigmatisation that wearing it may cause. Now, with regards to reoffending behaviour, I recently got my hands on the final impact evaluation that has been kind of under wraps for a little while. I think it's quite fair to say that this evaluation suffered from issues around data matching for the cohorts. So I'm quite reluctant to place any significant weight on the evaluation findings, but in the interest of fairness, the authors concluded the level of reoffending for offenders on the AAMR is not significantly different to those 6 months or 12 months post-sentence. However, they do commit more reoffences than a comparison group across both entire timeframes. So just to unpack this a little bit, one complication with this analysis was the different lengths of time. So AAMR offenders were subject to the tag for an average of 64 days, while the control group spent 445 days on their order. So essentially the AAMR had more time off the order to reoffend than the control group across both timeframes. So we have to take that into account. Second, the report authors maintained that a cost-benefit analysis revealed that the net cost to society of sentencing an offender to a AAMR is approximately £2,500 more than sentencing the same individual to a community sentence involving probation supervision. Let's move on. The second AAMR pilot was launched in June 2017. It ran for just under 2 years. And as Anthea touched on earlier, the purpose of this pilot was to answer some questions that the first pilot just wasn't able to do. So particularly in relation to domestic violence offences. And that cohort had previously been excluded from participating in the MOPAC pilot at the request of the MOJ. Now, a process evaluation found that 226 individuals were issued the AAMR, and some were tagged more than once, so it was ultimately 231 orders in total. 31% of wearers were convicted of DV. Overall, the compliance rate, again, was high. 94% successfully completed their requirement. Now, with regards to alcohol consumption itself, over 3/4 of tag-off survey respondents reported that they thought they would drink less alcohol or no alcohol at all when the tag was removed. However, some wearers were worried about whether they would be able to maintain their sobriety. With regards to health and well-being, those who had received a AAMR reported feeling healthier and happier for achieving a period of abstinence. But again, size of the tag, comfort of the tag, stigmatization were raised as issues. Now, with regards to the introduction of the AAMR across all courts in England and Wales, there's no published evaluation reports available at present. It's a little bit early. There are also no published evaluation reports that discuss the alcohol monitoring on licence pilot that was conducted in Wales. It's very possible that the MOJ has those, so please do feel free to request them, but I don't have access to them right now. The MOJ did, however, just release a report that details statistics on electronic monitoring in England and Wales from 30th of September to 30th of September 2022, sorry, 2021 to 2022. And there were 5,215 new alcohol monitoring orders imposed across England and Wales in the year ending 30th of September. A large increase from the 1,655 seen in the year before. And this primarily reflects the rollout of the AAMR and the introduction of alcohol monitoring on licence. Overall, 6,870 alcohol monitoring orders have been imposed since they were introduced just a few years ago. Of the alcohol tags in use to monitor AAMR requirements, between July 2022 and September 2022, the tags did not register a tamper or alcohol alert 97% of the time. And since their introduction in October 2020, the tags did not register a tamper or alcohol alert 97.1% of the time. So we're seeing a little pattern here. We've got a 3% issue. So this is what we know so far. For now, I'd like to spend just a few minutes outlining the research that I'm hoping to conduct between early 2024 and 2027 to plug gaps in the existing knowledge base. So I'm proposing a £300,000 multi-strand, multidisciplinary work package. And the aim of these kind of strands will be to establish criminal justice practitioner receptivity to imposing a AAMR or an AML, understand why, when, and when and where the AAMR and the AML are imposed. So we are seeing that some courts seem more willing to impose these orders than others. So let's dig deep, find out why. Explore the barriers and facilitators to imposing a AAMR and AML, to truly ascertain if the AAMR and AML reduce reoffending with some robust data, and determine if they are cost-effective requirements, so a much more comprehensive look at that. And finally, I really want to gain an insight into the lived experiences of those who are subjected to a AAMR or an AML, and crucially, their families. We have a huge gap in knowledge about what it is like to wear the tag, to understand the kind of daily impact of that, and crucially, you know, the impact on the people who are living with those who are tagged. To do this, I'm going to collaborate with two academics from the UK, and we're going to do some robust statistical analysis of MOJ courts and probation data sets, undertake some comprehensive cost effectiveness modelling. We'll do some case studies in high and low uptake areas, and collect some really rich and deep interview data from offenders and their families. Of particular interest here, I think, are those who have committed or who've survived domestic violence. I'd really like to know the impact that having a tag in the household can have on the willingness or inclination of a domestic violence victim to flee. Now, this research package will, of course, be designed to inform policy in England and Wales, but I'm eager to share the interim and final research findings internationally to assist with decision making and, to inform kind of future developments across the globe. So do get in touch if you feel I can be of any help in designing your programs, and I'd be more than happy to share what I know. Okay, that is all from me. Thank you very much.
Dziękujemy pani dr Lorze Bainbridge. Teraz przechodzimy do dyskusji. Jeżeli ktoś ma pytania tutaj spośród osób zgromadzonych w sali czy online, to proszę, zaczynamy.
To może jeżeli mogę zacząć. Chciałam podzielić się z Państwem pewnymi refleksjami, które mi nasunęły się po tych 3 wystąpieniach. Mianowicie uważam, i myślę, że Państwo też to zauważyliście, że wdrożenie tego typu technologii jest przede wszystkim czasochłonne, jest wymagające prowadzenia badań pilotażowych, czyli nie od razu wdrażamy, tylko wdrażamy punktowo w tych miejscach i w tych obszarach życia społecznego, w których no, szacujemy, że będzie taka technologia przydatna. To jest podstawowa rzecz. Po drugie, oczywiście większość spraw związanych z wprowadzaniem innowacyjnych technologii, innowacyjnych projektów jest związana niekoniecznie z samym wdrożeniem, ale z kształtowaniem polityki społecznej, tak jak tutaj Laura wyartykułowała, ponieważ tego typu badania naukowe, bo nasze badanie również jest, nasz projekt jest projektem naukowo-badawczym. I jak widzicie Państwo, też wszystkie działania, które w tych krajach, o których słyszeliśmy dzisiaj, to działanie jest oparte o wyniki badań naukowych. Te wyniki badań mają za zadanie uruchomić pewien sposób myślenia i przede wszystkim u decydentów, no bo my dajemy materiał, natomiast decydenci podejmują decyzję zgodnie z tą nazwą, czy wdrażamy, czy nie. Oczywiście wszystko prowadzi do 2 podstawowych pytań. Kto to ma robić i przede wszystkim jakie są koszty. Na etapie badań naukowych możemy tylko i wyłącznie szacować, bo to decydenci decydują o tym, podejmują wiążące decyzje, kogo obejmują, kogo mamy objąć, prawda, monitoringiem, czyli ile osób, jakie grupy, kogo zaangażować do monitorowania, czy ewentualnie obsługi takiego wdrożenia. Jeszcze raz powtórzę, projekt MSA nie jest projektem wdrażającym, on jest projektem przygotowującym do wdrożenia i robimy wszystko, żeby dać naprawdę rzetelną podstawę do tego, żeby zacząć myśleć społecznie o tym, co możemy zrobić, aby przede wszystkim było jak najmniej powrotności do przestępstwa, a po drugie, w jaki sposób pomóc tym ludziom, którzy mają problem alkoholowy, którzy popełniają przestępstwa pod wpływem alkoholu, w jaki sposób możemy im pomóc, żeby zmienili styl życia, żeby poddali się terapii, bo wiemy, że każdy alkoholik z założenia ma ten proces wypierania swojego uzależnienia, a więc tutaj można wiele zdziałać w różnych obszarach. I dlaczego zaczęliśmy w obszarze penitencjarnym? Już powiedziałam wcześniej, że przede wszystkim ze względu na pandemię najprościej było zrobić pilotaż w środowisku zamkniętym. Częściowo, no bo tutaj analizowaliśmy zachowania osób, osadzonych, którzy wychodzili bez konwojenta do pracy zewnętrznej, ale myślę, że w wielu innych obszarach, i o tym powiem w swoim wystąpieniu też, powtórzę, w wielu innych obszarach probacyjnym, ale też i tych wolnościowych, takie zastosowanie jest konieczne tej technologii, dlatego że to pomaga ludziom w samodyscyplinie, a przecież tak naprawdę chodzi o to, że jeżeli ktoś ma świadomość uzależnienia, ktoś ma świadomość problemów alkoholowych, to znamy też my z punktu widzenia nauki, ale też i z obserwacji codziennych, że ci ludzie nie mają tych powściągów silnych, to w tym momencie takie monitorowanie pomaga im właśnie w tej samokontroli zachowania. Ja jestem zwolenniczką nierozdzielania w tym przypadku przestrzeni penitencjarnej, probacyjnej, wolnościowej. To są przestrzenie, które wzajemnie się warunkują. Jeżeli zastosujemy pewne rozwiązania powstrzymujące od picia alkoholu na etapie więziennictwa, to po wyjściu, po zakończeniu kary pozbawienia wolności, ci ludzie, czy ten człowiek, obojętnie jakbyśmy to nie analizowali, przechodzi w zupełnie inny wymiar funkcjonowania i tam też jest potrzebne to monitorowanie. Jeszcze bardziej jest potrzebne monitorowanie właśnie w przestrzeni wolnościowej, kiedy ci ludzie niekoniecznie do końca zresocjalizowani, bo różnie opuszczają jednostki penitencjarne, no, też muszą radzić sobie z tym uzależnieniem, z tymi swoimi zapędami agresywnymi po alkoholu. Więc to jest taka moja refleksja i myślę też, że bardzo ważna sprawa to jest etyka. I tutaj pani profesor Atea bardzo pięknie nam to wyłożyła i myślę, że my też projektując wstępnie jeszcze te nasze działania w ramach tego TMS-a, braliśmy to pod uwagę, dlatego też no, przebadaliśmy i osadzonych, i funkcjonariuszy po przetestowaniu tej technologii. Ja bardzo prosiłabym, abyśmy może wzbudzili tutaj jakąś dyskusję na ten temat. Może pana pułkownika poproszę o kilka słów.
Ja tak patrząc i słuchając tego wystąpienia jednego pani profesor i pani doktor, nie da się rozdzielić to, co mówiliśmy, że osoby, takie jest pytanie, pić albo nie pić. Ja od 30 lat jestem w służbie więziennej prawie i przez te 30 lat, jak zaczynałem służbę, większość przestępstw była popełniona pod wpływem alkoholu. I zastanawiałem się, jak tym ludziom pomóc. Podstawą ten człowiek musi zacząć chcieć. To jest podstawa. I jeżeli ta osoba będzie chciała, to nieważne, czy będę miał tą obrożę takiego koloru, czy takiego, jasne, oczywiście wdrażamy to, ale ja muszę chcieć. Tok myślenia. Teraz bardzo często rozmawiając z tymi ludźmi, padało takie stwierdzenie, pan wie, gdzie ja wracam? Ja wracam w to środowisko, czyli jest powrót do środowiska. Próbujmy zmienić to środowisko. On mówi, jak ja tam wrócę, ja nie mogę nie pić. To, co stwierdziliśmy, że jak mamy obrączkę na nodze, to jest coś takiego, spotykamy się z kolegą w środowisku i jest jeszcze ten taki sięgnięcie, a nie, mam obrączkę dzisiaj, to nie mogę, wiecie, nie mogę. To jest to, które może, takie clue mam. I ta obrączka, jeżeli uda nam się pomóc na 10 osób, choć jednej osobie, to jest nasz potężny sukces. 2, 3. Myślę, że badania i prowadzenie tych działań, im mniej osób trafi do więzienia, czy osoby wychodzące na warunkowe zwolnienie. I mamy jeszcze, patrząc na to wszystko, taki aspekt społeczny, rodzinny. Patrzyłem kiedyś na ludzi odbywających karę pozbawienia wolności i ta osoba pierwszy raz, która trafia za to przestępstwo, większe, mniejsze, pomoc i użyczenie tego, że odbywasz karę jednak w systemie tym elektronicznym, czy nie trafiasz do tego, bo masz rodzinę i będziesz tej rodzinie pomagał, to jest bardzo ważne. To myślenie, ale my musimy tym ludziom pomóc. Jeżeli my im nie pomożemy, wprowadzając ten system działania, to tego nie będzie. Tu bardzo mi się podobał ten slajd, gdzie był z jednej strony anioł, a z drugiej strony diabeł. I tak właśnie spoglądanie w jedną czy w drugą stronę. Nie jesteśmy w stanie stwierdzić, czy nadużywając alkoholu prędzej czy później trafimy do tego więzienia. Czy to za przestępstwo, tak jak tu rozmawialiśmy, komunikacyjne, bo nadużywając tego alkoholu, my to prawdopodobieństwo stąpania po kruchym lodzie jest bardzo trudne. Mamy przestępstwa komunikacyjne, przemoce w rodzinie, wiele innych, zabójstwa, gwałty. Może być tak, że osoba, która niekoniecznie nadużywa tego alkoholu często, ale jest taki motywator. To jest krótki ląd, że jeżeli ja się napiję tego alkoholu, to staję się odważniejszy i wtedy sobie mogę pozwolić na wiele. I to są osoby, które trafiają do tego więzienia u nas, odbywają to karę pozbawienia wolności i w którymś momencie on opuszcza i on się rozgląda, czy ja sobie poradzę. I teraz zakładając tą bransoletkę, to będzie coś takiego, aha, coś nade mną czuwa, coś ja mam na nodze, coś jest. I w tym momencie nie będzie sięgał, nie sięgnę. Rozmawiając w towarzystwie, on zaprosi kobietę, dziewczynę i jak będzie pił alkohol, nie, bo po tym alkoholu mam problemy. Lepiej nie. I jeżeli to stwierdzą, uratuje choć jedną, dwie kolejne osoby przed popełnieniem takiego przestępstwa, to wystarczy. Tu padało coś takiego, że no praca w barze, czy osoba będzie, no te bransoletki, z reguły ludzie chowają te bransoletki. To jest taki aspekt troszeczkę wstydliwy, gdzie nie każdy będzie chciał, żeby popatrzcie, bo jestem alkoholikiem, bo jestem uzależniony, bo coś jest ze mną nie tak. Jak wcześniej, tak jak wspomniałem, przez wiele lat pracy służby w zakładach penitencjarnych brałem udział w meetingach otwartych, gdzie na te meetingi przychodziły osoby, które udało się im wyjść z tego alkoholu, uciec. Szanowni Państwo, opowieści w życiu, co te osoby przeszły. Mężczyzn jeszcze jakoś tak na początku patrzyłem na mężczyzn, dobrze, napił się, narozrabiał. Potem jak mi kobiety przyjeżdżały, kobiety opowiedziały swój styl życia, co robiły, jak to było, ja mówię, wow, to mówię, no szacun, że tym osobom się udało wyjść z tego, uciec z tej matni, bo można pić całe życie i z tego nie wyjść. Kolejnym elementem, obok tej bransoletki musi być jeszcze coś, nie coś, ktoś, dobry człowiek. Ja życząc komuś, składając życzenia, zawsze mówię samych dobrych dni i dobrych ludzi wokół siebie. Bo jeżeli jest ktoś, kto ci poda tą rękę, gdzie my możemy liczyć na tą osobę, chodź idziemy pobiegać, chodź idziemy na rower, nie pójdziemy na piwo, nie chodź na rower, nie w tą stronę. Czyli osoba, która jak gdyby zmienia tor naszego, taką drogę w życiu. My mamy wiele dróg w życiu do wyboru i musi być ktoś, kto będzie nas wspierał, bo my czasami nie myślimy. Kolejny element, jestem mądry, doświadczony dzięki błędom popełnionym. Tak kiedyś sobie o tym myślałem, zawsze na jakichś spotkaniach, na odprawach rocznych z moimi pracownikami o tym mówię, że ja nie jestem idealny, ja też popełniałem błędy, ja też się myliłem, ja nie wiem wszystkiego, ale dzięki wam wspólnie, jak działamy, my jesteśmy w stanie zbudować coś naprawdę dobrego. Dziękuję bardzo.
No właśnie, i to jest to. Działajmy wspólnie po to, żeby zrobić coś dobrego dla tych ludzi, którzy rzeczywiście potrzebują pomocy. I bardzo dziękuję za tą wypowiedź odnośnie tego noszenia bransoletek. Bransoleta jest podstawą. To jest podstawa. Natomiast człowiek, ludzie wokół, to już jest ten kontekst, który będzie wspierał tych ludzi w abstynencji. No przede wszystkim, moi drodzy, nasuwa się podstawowe pytanie, może inaczej, refleksja też. Trzeba edukować, trzeba mówić o tym, trzeba pilotaże w różnych środowiskach realizować, i o tym trzeba dyskutować. Takie konferencje, takie spotkania, nawet spotkania przedstawicieli różnych instytucji, tak jak my tutaj jesteśmy, prawda, no świat nauki z światem praktyki się spotkał w tym momencie. To jest bardzo ważne, dlatego że czerpiemy od siebie bardzo wiele. Ja nie jestem penitencjarystką, nie pracuję w więzieniu i oczywiście byłam w więzieniu nie jako pacjent czy klient, ale pracowałam wolontarystycznie, znam materię od w sumie 20 lat, jestem blisko tym zagadnieniom ale ja wielu rzeczy nie wiem, dlatego też ważne jest spojrzenie tutaj naszych wspaniałych funkcjonariuszy. Bardzo prosiłabym teraz pana o wypowiedź, dobrze?
Szanowni Państwo, niewątpliwie urządzenie, ja w ogóle dziękuję za możliwość udziału w tej bardzo ciekawej konferencji, która no też jak gdyby zaznacza, że wpływ technologii, nowych rozwiązań ma tutaj no nieocenione znaczenie. Ja nie mówię tutaj jako praktyk, jako osoba, która spogląda na funkcjonowanie tego urządzenia tylko w warunkach izolacji penitencjarnej, która wspiera w jakiś sposób ten proces, bo tutaj oczywiście wspieraliśmy pewien aspekt, osoby, które wychodziły poza teren jednostki penitencjarnej do zatrudnienia zewnętrznego, ale patrzę też na możliwość implementowania tych rozwiązań do tak zwanej oceny, ewaluacji pewnych oddziaływań penitencjarnych, które stosujemy w warunkach izolacji penitencjarnej. Oczywiście urządzenie może też wskazywać, czy dobór tych metod i treści, które stosowaliśmy względem chociażby osób uzależnionych od alkoholu w trakcie odbywania kary w warunkach oddziałów terapeutycznych, były skuteczne, bo jeżeli my możemy zmierzyć to, czy taka osoba później sięga po ten alkohol po zwolnieniu z jednostki penitencjarnej, możemy mieć jakąś informację zwrotną, że te metody i środki nie do końca były trafne, tak? Także możemy pewne oddziaływania penitencjarne stosowane względem tych osób jeszcze w trakcie odbywania kary w jakiś sposób dosyć istotny korygować. I myślę, że tutaj też jest jakaś metoda do takiego szerszego spojrzenia na możliwości tego urządzenia.
Dziękuję bardzo. Ja myślę, Maju, że zaprosimy Państwa w tej chwili może na lunch. Zjedzmy, posilmy się i wróćmy dalej do dyskusji.
13:45. Dziękujemy.